This presentation is going to be about live sound. The word immersive, for me, is an interesting word. I mean, we all know immersive as a kind of feeling, but today I want to cover a quick history of immersive audio as it relates to live performances. I'm going to introduce Constellation, which is Meyer Sound's immersive platform. And at the end, I'm going to invite you all to experience world-class immersive sound installation, but not here and not today. I first heard the word immersive as it relates to live performance sound a year ago. Now, that's maybe just me, but I do travel around the world. I go to a lot of trade shows. It was only 1 year ago that the word immersive suddenly burbled up to the top. And so this is a very great opportunity to talk a little bit about Meyer's involvement in immersive. Okay, so there's an example of a physical acoustic immersion, and I think we can all imagine what that would sound like. I certainly hope so. I have a feeling that if I were one of those two people standing there in that cave, that I would know, here we go, that I would have a feeling, I would know what it would sound like, and it would certainly be immersive. A different kind of immersive, but the same idea, sitting on a rock or a log quietly, hopefully no highway nearby. Pretty peaceful, but certainly an immersive situation. So when did all of this begin? Well, I chose the only example that is not live sound. I chose Fantasia, because Walt Disney in 1940 had this fabulous orchestra that was going to play his soundtrack, and he wanted something much better. And he wanted the audience to be immersed. He wanted the orchestra to come across to everyone and have it do so with some realism. So he literally built a sound department of engineers of the day, and those guys worked tirelessly and literally from the ground up invented a multi-track process to do that. It was 3 tracks and 1 other track to manage dynamic range. Pretty clever. The next example is live sound. Notice the date, 1965. Some of you might remember quad as a thing, a stereo thing, a home entertainment thing. That was started in around 1972, and it moved right up to 1976 or 1977, and there were a lot of things that killed quad. This is 1965. Pink Floyd did a gig, Games for the May concert. It was all analog. We're going to talk about how they did it in just a second. And then there's this example, pretty famous, 1973. This is what today we at Meyer consider spatial audio mixing. This is where you have a stage that has 2 or 3 or 4 hangs, and you're able to spread your image out. A little bit like what Walt Disney did. The next one, I couldn't help it. I had to throw this one in. Does anybody remember the Stampeders in 1975? They were riding pretty high, a Canadian band from, I guess, Winnipeg originally, but they're all pretty much settled in Toronto today. And this was at the height of quad, as the record industry was promoting it. So they decided to do a, what did they call it? Quadra concert tour. And to do this quadra concert tour, they had to figure out how to do it, and I helped them figure out how to do it electronically at first. So that was in 1975. 4 speakers, same as same as these guys here, but 10 years later. Now we move a little bit into Meyer land here, because we have an executive who's on the Constellation team at Meyer Sound, and this was his contribution back in 1986. This was digitally controlled analog. Multiple channels, you can see them on the inside of that. It was a puffed up dome. It was actually around for a couple of years, and it was a purely experimental multi-channel surround immersion experience. And then we moved to pure digital in 2005. That's the shot right there of the LCS control system driving Matrix 3 processors, and that ran the show, and to this day it still runs the show. Back in 2004, Meyer built a theater. There's a lot of information on it on the web, but it won a lot of awards for its acoustic construction and its isolation and its frequency response. In 2006, they put a Constellation system into that theater space. That was the first Constellation to be installed. We're going to switch now a little bit to some of the equipment that was used historically. Mickey Mouse is not going to be part of this. Although I suppose you could say that I don't even think that's Mickey Mouse. That's pretty interesting. That's the first known quad panner, and that was in 1965. The Stampeders used that console. I built that console, and in the center are a bunch of quad panners. So we took some channels out, we took the buses in the console, we fed them to quad panners, and we distributed those quad panners to 4 outputs. The Stampeders ran with that on several tours. Ultimately, a couple of years later, they no longer did quad. And they no longer did quad, not because it wasn't a terrific effect, but they did it because they stopped because it was just too expensive. And I'm not going to harp on that theme, but live performance sound that moves around on tour, getting your stacks and racks up and running for reasonably conventional treatment of a large space is expensive, and doing it with multi-channels is a lot more expensive. Another piece of gear, this was something that I designed in 1982. This is digitally controlled analog as well. It was run by a PC. It's 24 ins and 24 outs, and we set up several demonstrations with 24 loudspeakers, and were able to move sounds around, which was the whole idea. It was actually used on Into the Woods and Broadway for 2 years. Some of the other tools, Steve Ellison, back to that white geodesic dome, this was what his vintage gear was to make a multi-channel, also digitally controlled analog in 1985. So Level Control Systems, Steve Ellison's company, was acquired by Meyer Sound in 2005. And from 1996 on, it was an analog system that was digitally controlled. And from 2000 on, it was fully digital. And in 2005, Meyer purchased LCS and then immediately started revving all of the hardware. So this brings us to Constellation. Meyer Sound introduced Constellation to the marketplace in 2006. So that would have been, I think, 12 years ago. It is a big system. In terms of hardware, it has a lot of pickup microphones in a space. It has a lot of loudspeakers in a space, and every loudspeaker in that space is connected to an advanced DSP platform called Dimitri. So when you go into a Constellation installation, you see speakers like these, except a lot more of them. You see them down the walls, you see them overhead, and you see microphones hanging down sometimes, and sometimes you don't notice them. But that's essentially the hardware behind Constellation. Why Constellation? Well, if we want to do chamber music, we need a space, a performing space, a room that has a short reverb time. There's other things that require short reverb times as well. I just picked that example. In a lot of theaters, in most theaters, we want a medium reverberation time. Sorry for being so completely non-definitive here, but it's a complex subject, and I'm hitting it very basically. I want you to come to the invitation at the end of the presentation. And then, of course, for a symphony, generally speaking, a longer reverberation time. And we don't even want to talk about this one. So I hope this is readable. Yep, seems to be. And envelopment is the word that for the last 12 years, and it's a word that acousticians use. Envelopment is the word that we've been using, not the other one. And I knew I was going to forget it.
Source broadening.
Sorry?
Source broadening.
Source, oh, there he is. There he is. Thank you for being here. Okay. Envelopment is the word I keep forgetting. Source broadening. Okay, very good. Anyway, here we have it. Envelopment, as it goes from low to high, so does the reverb time, or the opposite is true. As the reverb time goes up, generally speaking, we're going to see more envelopment, and we're going to see less intelligibility. So we have down below some examples of lower reverb times and higher reverb times that lend to the performance. Obviously, if you want to enjoy an ideal performance, you need a number of factors. One of them, a critical one, is the room that you're performing in. So we have 4 communication processes in a live performance. This is the one I think we all think of. This is the one that kind of comes to mind. I'm the performer and you're the audience. So there's 3 more. You're the audience and I'm the performer. So if you like what I'm doing, you might laugh, and I might hear you. I heard you. But I might not hear you, or I might not get a feeling that you're serious, or you might applaud, and I might just get the feeling that it's not very enthusiastic. And a lot of that has to do with the audience and the room, not just the performer and the audience. If I am a small group up here giving a performance, maybe 4 strings, a quintet or something like that, and I'm playing, I wouldn't want to play up here. This is a bad acoustic space for that type of performance. In fact, it's a bad acoustic space for this type of performance, for the spoken word. I'm pushing. I'm stressed a little bit, my voice. And it's because this is not a friendly environment for a talker. Thank God for sound reinforcement. The last one is audience, room, and audience. I was thinking, will I ask you to applaud? I'll do the applause because we are in the same room. My mic's going to screw it up, but it's no fun in this room to applaud. Nothing's happening. So when you have a performance and that performer has finished, people say, that was good. I want to applaud. Well, in a room like this, that applause will not last long. Too much work, nothing back. Same is true in a church. I'm your minister for today. I'm spreading the gospel of Constellation. But we're going to have a hymn in a moment, and you're all going to stand up and sing. No, you're not. You're going to see the words on the screen, but you're not very good singers. And you don't want to sing. But if the reverb time of that room is changed, and I pop it right up, you can do nothing wrong. You're in your own shower at home, and away you go. All right. So we have different kinds of performers. We have solo artists, quartets, we have choirs, we have musical theater, we have entertainment spectacles. That's what we call shows like Broadway, not Broadway shows, but shows in Vegas. There's 14 or 15 of them right now using Constellation for a variety of things, going back to those 4 interactions. We call those spectacles. Symphonies, rock bands, a pastor, a minister, a lecturer, or a corporate CEO. Well, somebody asked about boardrooms, so we'll get to that. So what does Constellation do for us in this regard? Well, it gives us a room that can be controlled. The reverberation time in that room can be controlled. It actually can do a lot more, but this is the focal of Constellation. So the rest of this presentation really is just to kind of talk about how Constellation, how successful it's been, and to try to give you some different examples of how it's being used. So, multi-purpose educational. We've only got so many dollars. We got lots of things we need to do in the room. We can only afford one room. A corporate meeting room. Well, very expensive things are going to be discussed in this room. We want this room to be comfortable. We want it to be comfortable for the person talking, and we want it to be comfortable for the people who are listening. There's a bunch of different varieties of this. Obviously, a performance space. If a municipality is building a performance space, it's going to be reasonably austere, but if they have to support a whole variety of applications, then Constellation can help greatly. A lot of universities are using Constellation. They're using it for lecture halls one day, choral recitals the next day, totally different acoustic requirements. I'm going to skip that one because I don't know what that one actually is. This is a Museum of the Bible in DC, so museums. This is a very interesting space which we don't have time to talk about. It's the basement of San Francisco Opera. It's a horrible environment that they've turned into a fabulous club. Again, presentation space. This is a university. Pretty nice. University multi-use again. This is Stanford. Now that's a perfect example. That's the kind of room we can afford to build. Acoustic ceiling, carpet, tables and chairs. Not a very friendly room acoustically. This is a high-end corporate presentation room in Europe. And then we have the spectacle that picked love for that one. This is what I would consider to be a pretty classic, smaller Presbyterian church. Presbyterians don't normally buy stuff like Constellation. Notice in this shot the line array. We're building a room, but we can put anything in that room that makes sound, including a sound system. The Constellation doesn't take a microphone on a stage and amplify it and distribute it. It takes whatever is happening in the room, whether it be applause or coughs, noise, or a performance, and it puts it in a room. So very commonly in multi-use rooms, you'll see a sound system as well. Corporate presentation room, isn't that amazing? This is a musical in Germany, Rocky the Musical. This is a high-end bank in Denmark. This is just a corporate meeting room. Another church in Virginia. This is a very, I've been to this church a couple of times, and Northlands Church, this is a perfect example. This is where the pastor of that church said, when it's time to sing, we change the reverb in the room. We boot it up. Nobody even knows it's happening. Everybody stands up. As they stand up and make all kinds of noise, it's enveloping. And when they sing, nobody can hear if they're off key or not. It's not as bad as I'm making it sound, but I think you can understand the comfort level. This room was very successful. And it was so successful that the symphony wanted to use it. So this is a church that the symphony wanted to use, and they're using it. And we're getting close to the end now. In fact, we're at the end, but this is the McMaster LiveLab in Hamilton, Ontario. These are wonderful people. This is this facility was built. This was a total labor of love, building this room, and it's in the Department of Psychology. So Laurel Traynor heads that department up. She was a driving force between LiveLab. She wanted a performance space where she could analyze the brain of performers as she changed the environment. This is it, second to last slide. This is the invitation. So next Thursday, October the 4th. Any of you who are available, there's a web sign up, and Pierre's coming up from Meyer Sound to talk about Constellation, but we'll be able to actually use the room as part of that presentation, and it's very unlikely he'll use a microphone. Thank you very much.